welcome to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him at gods5minutes@gmail.com. Now, here's Ed Wilson with God's 5 Minutes.
Hello, friends. The Holy Bible is a treasure trove of colorful figures who have left their mark on history's pages by their fascinating, inspired writing and wide-ranging adventures. They have bearded monarchs on their thrones, been hunted fugitives, been powerful rulers in some of the world's greatest empires, and been instrumental in setting a pattern of holy behavior that has defined ethics and morality to Earth's peoples. Not the least of these remarkable souls is Jeremiah. Jeremiah was called of God to be a prophet. That means it was his duty to get the word at the mouth of the Lord and give it to the people. He had a long life, beginning somewhere around 650 years before Jesus was born. His father was a priest from a village near Jerusalem, and in the practice of his day, he gave his boy a religious name, for Jeremiah means the Lord will restore. That moniker really fit Jeremiah, for the nation of Judah during his lifetime went from having a king, Josiah, who was resolved to buff and reestablish Jehovah worship, through 4 other kings, each worse than the last, down to weak Zedekiah. The most significant event of his administration was that his foolish, ungodly ways landed Judah in Babylonian exile. Jeremiah turned out to be a very devout man and also a great patriot. He was very young when he started. He tried to tell the Lord he was too young, but was no more successful than Moses was with his plea of being tongue-tied. So he manfully tackled his life work and preached to people who mostly didn't want to hear him for about 42 years. King Josiah was an ardent reformer, and Jeremiah a fiery young crusading prophet, zealously holding up a high standard of being humble, charitable, diligent in keeping God's law. Together, king and prophet pushed back against pagan practices and luxurious living that tried to work together to corrupt the nation. Then Josiah, who was Judah's last good king, met an early end. Next came Josiah's son Jehoiahaz, who lasted 3 months before the Egyptians decided they liked his brother Jehoiakim better and put him on the throne. He was a self-indulgent man. He enslaved many of his own people and demanded exorbitant taxes so he could construct lavish palaces. Of course, Jeremiah preached against these abuses. He was a man who used many types of symbols during his ministry. He wrote a scroll full of the king's and people's sins and read it before Jehoiakim. It didn't work. The furious king cut it up in little pieces and burned it before his face. You can imagine the courage it took to be a man of God in the court of such a rebel. On another occasion, Jeremiah, acting at God's instruction, bought a piece of pottery and smashed it before his audience while preaching, trying to show them God's prophecy that he would do the same with both the people and their city if they insisted on doing evil. No doubt there were believers in Judah who loved the Lord and listened to Jeremiah's message, just as God has always had a people. But the stubborn kings only got worse. Next was Jehoiachin, who set out to do worse than his evil father did, and he succeeded. But he also brought on the nation an assault of the Babylonian army. During part of Jehoiachin's reign and that of his successor Zedekiah, using another symbol, Jeremiah made a yoke like oxen wear and went around through the city and the country, wearing it on his neck, trying to tell his countrymen God had sentenced them to captivity and that their captivity would be more merciful if they would surrender and accept it. Nothing he tried to do for God was easy, and this was no exception. A man named Hananiah rose up against Jeremiah, declared he was a prophet too, and that Jeremiah was wrong, and broke Jeremiah's yoke. Somewhere along with everything else, his enemies threw him in a pit. But notice how he finishes. He said, I am the man that has seen affliction by the rod of his wrath, and then it is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. We salute another of God's champions. Have you talked to him today?
You have been listening to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him by email at godsfiveminutes@gmail.com. Tune in next time to hear more encouraging thoughts from God's Word on God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson.